The Powers Project.
Amanda, how are you, young lady?
Hey, thank you for calling me young lady. I'm doing a lot better now. How are
Every-
you doing?
I'm doing great. Everybody's young. But I will tell you, I like this shirt I have on. It makes me look better than normal. I mean, I think I'm a handsome looking man to begin with, but today I feel especially handsome.
Oh yeah, I love a good flannel. I love a good plaid. I mean, it's a lesbian staple, but it looks good on everybody.
I want you to know I wore this in your honor.
I appreciate it. I did notice it right away.
Well, the funny thing is, I have a lot of lesbian friends, and not one of them wears flannel. And I go, "Are you sure you're lesbian?"
Wow, they're missing out. At least
No,
you have your flannel PJs, you have your flannel going out shirts, you have your flannel shirts that you use when you're fixing things around the house. You have different types of flannel, different colors for different occasions. There's some great Christmas ones with the red and the green. They're missing the boat.
I know. I don't know how I get these lesbians in my life who don't wear flannel. I just don't know where. I don't know how I find them, but I do. So
What do they wear? I don't even know what they would wear.
yeah, I know. It's normal people clothes.
Ah, maybe next
Yeah.
Christmas.
So so you're a comedian in New Orleans, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Well, before COVID, I was a very active comedian. Now semi-active and focusing, on some online stuff. But fingers crossed, we're going to get back to it as soon as we can.
Yeah. So let's talk. Let's address that first. Since COVID's hit and this pandemic has hit, um, it's pretty much decimated all the arts and comedy included. I would say that, and I know in California that they still have the clubs closed down out there. Is that the case in New Orleans?
Yeah, so New Orleans, we actually we don't have a comedy club officially. They were starting one that was going to open like about a month after COVID hit. So we had fingers crossed we were going to start getting some bigger names out here. But it's a very New Orleans kind of guerrilla scene where mostly at bars we have shows, and a lot of bars have performance venues in the back. So we had a very active scene. We had a lot of celebrities like to come to New Orleans. First off, they were filming a lot of stuff here. And second off, it's New Orleans. If you like to party and drink and have a good time, you're going to come to New Orleans. So Hannibal Buress used to come here multiple times a year. There's a ton of different comics coming through. So we were starting to really build up this scene. But since it was all at bars and restaurants and different spaces like that, when COVID hit, those all shut down for a few months, and then now they're kind of open, but the limited capacity, and we're not doing any indoor shows. Are not allowed. We've been able to. I did a show at a park in downtown New Orleans, so we're trying to. It's kind of cool that you have these new spaces that you're able to use for comedy, but at the same time, I miss the old spaces.
Right. Well, I imagine it's a little more challenging to control everything when it's an outside space than when you're inside.
Yeah, it's a different vibe. Like I did a show. We have a movie theater, the Broad Theater, and when COVID hit, they rented out the parking lot next door, and they created basically this giant outdoor space so you could watch movies, or they have music and they have comedy there. And I did a show there, and the stage is so far away from everybody, and everybody's so spread out. When you're in a small room in a bar that holds 20 people, and there are 30 people crammed in there, and you're telling a joke that is hitting, and that laughter is radiating off the walls and the ceilings and everybody around you, that's an amazing vibe. It's an adrenaline rush, greater than probably jumping out of a plane. I haven't done that, but I'll just assume that comedy is my skydiving. And then you compare that to an outdoor venue in a park in the middle of downtown, or in a theater space that they only let 50 people in, but the space could, if it was a concert, it would hold 500 people, but the way it's spaced out there, we have to be limited. So it's a different vibe, but also because people have been in their homes for so long, and people haven't had the chance to go out, it's kind of like, oh, no one, not nobody, but local comedy. Sometimes it was, you have all your friends, they're like, oh, what are you doing Friday? Oh, I have a show Friday. Oh, maybe I'll go next Friday, and then the minute they couldn't do it, it was like, when do you have a show? I'll figure out a way to do it. And so people are so appreciative of having just something to do, that vibe, they're there to laugh, and they're there to encourage you, and they're there just to to be part of something that's not their house and their cat and their dog.
Well, from being someone who's always been in the audience, I can tell you that it has that effect on us too. Like where you know, that you can grow off that, like you get that energy from the sound, from the laughter and everything. Well, the audience is the same way. It's sort of weird when I watch any of these late night shows and they don't have an audience, and and they're telling jokes and there's no laugh track or anything. It feels kind of weird. Like you go, yeah, the joke's funny, but it's funnier when you hear other people laughing beside yourself. So I completely understand. So it should be mentioned, we just covered that you are indeed a comedian. You're obviously female, and as we touched on earlier, you're also lesbian. So I had my first question for you is, what was it like for you coming out as a comedian?
Well,
and the fact that you came out lesbian, and which one was harder to tell?
by the time I started doing comedy, I had been out in my real life for about 7 years. And when I first came out, I had a girlfriend that wasn't out of the closet. And that really, at the end of the day, that destroyed our relationship because we couldn't just be in the way that, everybody else could. And it hurts when one person's in the closet and one person's not, because it essentially put me back in the closet. So once I was out of that relationship and I was, starting to want to perform, one of my first jokes I told was a lesbian haircut joke, which is every lesbian comedian has a lesbian haircut joke. I didn't know it at the time. But I used that joke for about 4 years, and I now have a new COVID iteration of that joke, because the lesbian haircut joke it's a comfortable joke that everyone can acknowledge. The same as flannel. We can all acknowledge that typically, except for your lesbian friends, that typically flannel and lesbians go together.
So, all right. So you came out of the closet before you became a comedian. Did you get, how was your coming out? Like, as far as, letting your family, your friends know, was that a smooth transition? Was that somewhat of a challenge?
It was mostly, thank the lucky stars, a very smooth transition. I was honestly almost disappointed because you planned to come out for so long and you're so nervous about it, and it's like, how am I going to tell people, and what if this happens, and what if they don't accept me, and then everyone was pretty much cool with it, and some people I feel like they kind of already knew. So it wasn't, they're just like, oh, finally she said it, so we can all just move on with our lives. But it was almost disappointing because you almost like want there to be some sort of drama in a way, because it's something that you've held in for so long and you've waited for this moment. And then it wasn't even like let's have a big party. It was like, okay, all right. So anyway, the weather's, going to be kind of cold tomorrow. It was very much that, which is, in hindsight, I'm very thankful for, because I don't want the fireworks and the drama. But in the moments when I was 23 and coming out, it was, I was almost like, oh, I could have just done this years ago. This was totally fine. But you build up in your head, and you read all these things, and you talk to people that have very bad experiences, and you're scared. You're scared you're going to lose your family, your friends, your comforts. Everyone could potentially turn their back on you, and that's a very scary thing. So I am, as much as I'll joke about it, I'm very thankful that everything went smoothly. My dad made a softball joke. That explains all the softball. Which, I was like, when you really go back into my, lesbian in the closet life, it is very obvious. There's a million, not just the softball, but a million obvious things. Like when Titanic came out, I was obsessed with Kate Winslet. I could have cared less about Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah. And I was like, why, she is a woman and he's a little boy, and I don't understand this. And in reality, it's like, she's beautiful, and that's what I was looking at. So there's all these things that when you play them back, you're like, oh yeah, check. I should have seen this. Everyone should have seen this. Yeah. But yeah, I was very, very lucky, and didn't lose a single person in my life, and also gained a lot from it, because when you're hiding something, whether it's being queer or anything about yourself, you're not your full person to everybody in your life. So you can't, I was with my friends, I was mostly a listener. I didn't really participate. I didn't really share. I always held myself back. And then you finally, when you come out, you don't have to hold back anymore. And you could just be you, and your relationships get better.
You're right. Whether you're telling a lie about who you are, if you lie to yourself about anything, you're not capable of being happy. Not You cannot be fully happy when you lie to yourself, no matter what the lie is about. So you're absolutely correct. It's just it's a difficult thing, and oftentimes, in hindsight, we realized that we were carrying the weight of the world around our shoulders, and it was self-imposed. But at the time, you don't think that's the case, and you think you're going to let the whole world down, and the world's going to come crashing down because they find out. You're fortunate because you didn't lose any loved ones, and I've known, myself included, many who have, and so it's nice that you had that support system. Are they just as supportive with you being a comedian, or did your dad go, a comedian?
Yeah, actually, so my dad, when I was younger, my dad actually was a comedy writer. He wrote, I don't know if it's probably before your time, but Joan Rivers had a late night show.
You're so sweet.
I think you call me a young lady. I think you look young and very spry and very energetic, and
Thank you.
I have no reason to suck up to you. You
no, because I have
seem very young and healthy.
Advance your career, unfortunately.
But yeah, my dad was a writer for Joan Rivers. She had a very short-lived late night show, which her husband was a producer. Long story short, he committed suicide during that time, and basically the show folded because of that. My dad, he was a writer, and he tried to do stand-up, but he had stage fright, so he couldn't. He couldn't get out there and do it. And so he was very happy that I was able to, get on stage and do that. And I didn't think I could. I was a quiet kid, and I think part of it, and I don't know if I don't know what your experience was with coming out and with holding that burden, but I was a very quiet kid. I think part of it was because I knew I was different, and I knew I had this thing that I couldn't talk about. So I would just be very quiet. And so for me to be the one on stage and the one that's, sharing way too much with people I don't know, it was a shock for me that I could even do it, which is why I wanted to do it. I tell everybody this, and I'll tell you this too. Everybody should do stand up. You should try an open mic, just one open mic, and you should do karaoke. Even if you can't sing at all, get yourself out there, just let loose. No offense to everybody, but nobody's going to remember the one time you went up there for 3 minutes, but you will know that you could do it, that you got up there and you just let go and did this thing. And it's so wonderful.
That's great advice. I've done karaoke. I've thought about doing open mic because I have, I have a lot of comedy things in my head. I write them down because I'll forget them. I can't even remember like silly jokes that I see, and I go, that's funny. I want to tell that joke. 5 minutes later, I go, what was that joke again?
That's what Twitter's for.
So, but I figured, Joe Rogan's the king of podcasting right now. And when I take over, it's going to hurt him. So I thought, if I go Mike and take over comedy from him too, he's just going to be heartbroken. So I can't do that to that man because I like that man a lot. So I just can't do that to him.
Yeah. So just the podcasting. You'll leave the stand-up alone.
I'll stick to my Elvis impression with karaoke. So, are you single, married, and a polygamy cult or something? Or?
No, I have a girlfriend. I am in a long-term, we've been together almost 5 years. And quarantining with somebody, I feel like you get an additional 5 years of time because you're spending a lot of time with that person. You're learning about them. You're just around them a lot. But yeah, I have no problem with however anyone wants to live their lives, but I'm into monogamy. That's my jam. And yeah, we're happy. We own a house together, which I say is more committed than marriage because you can't just undo that.
Right.
Like Britney Spears saw, she went to Vegas, got married 3 days later, was like, oh, the bright lights just freaked me out. So I got it annulled. You can't do that when you own a house. I'm like, you can't be more committed than that.
I agree. Have you ever used her in your act? And does it, and if you have, does she ever get irritated? Like, I don't say that. I didn't do that.
I have one joke about her, and the joke is about calling her beautiful and gorgeous. That's how the joke starts. So, so she's okay with that. I,
Oh,
as much as I am, put my personal life out there, there are some things that I like to keep to myself. I think for my relationship, it is important that there are moments that are just between her and I. But yeah, I mean, if something's funny, if I think of a bit that's funny, I'll absolutely tell it. But yeah, the bit I have about her is just how like straight dudes always come up to me and oh, your girlfriend's so hot. How'd you do it? How'd you get a chick so hot? And what's your secret? And I'm just like, I don't know, dude, like eye contact and respect.
yeah. That'll go a long ways with women.
Yeah.
I was listening to Joe Rogan, as a matter of fact, and they were talking about men who do catcalling, and I go, has that ever worked for any guy? Like, ever? Was there one? Was there one guy successful, and all these guys go, hey, we should do that? Like, I've never seen that work ever.
I have never seen it work. I've only seen it go badly.
Yes.
And I don't understand if it's something in a straight man's nature that's like, I can't let her go by without yelling a thing in her face. Like I don't understand it myself. Maybe Joe Rogan explained it a little better.
Yeah, no, he goes, I've never done that. He goes, I find it extremely disrespectful. And I do too. And I was like, I've I've been married to a woman. I dated women all the first half of my life, and not once did it ever come to my mind to go, hey, there's a good looking woman. I should go, hey, baby, you're hot. It never occurred to me to do that because I really didn't think that would work. So
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know anybody that has worked on, but it's still a thing that happens. I remember when COVID first happened. I have a day job, and I was in downtown New Orleans, just going to my office to pick up some files, and literally nobody's around. It's maybe April, May, everything's shut down. Everyone's working from home, and I'm walking. I was wearing sweatpants because it was like I'm just going to the office to pick up files. And there was one guy, and he decided to yell something at me about how beautiful I looked in my sweatpants and my mask. And I was like, okay, so catcalling is very much alive and well. Like he probably hadn't catcalled in months, and he was just like, I have to do it, I have to do it. And I was like, I don't understand that urge. I just don't get it.
you know what would end it? I can tell you what would end it right now. If you had 4 or 5 gay guys sitting out in the street corner somewhere and watching straight guys walk by and go, hey, baby, you look fine in those damn there jeans there. And let them see what that feels like. And I guarantee you that shit would stop real fast, like, because they would be so upset. They would probably try to pass a law that you can't catcall men or something.
Yeah, that's what they would do. It'd be like, oh, you can't catcall straight men. We're gonna make a law for that, but everyone else is fair game.
Exactly. So when you were younger, like, when did you know you didn't know at the beginning because you were very shy. So when did you finally know that you wanted to do comedy? Like, what got you started on that? Your dad?
I don't know what the moment was. I just like one day I came home and I was like, I'm gonna go do an open mic. I just decided to do it. I think I was about to turn 30 and I just wanted something different. But I still waited 6 more months. I studied comedy. I watched it. And sometimes I think it's sometimes too, you like watch stuff on TV and you're like, I could do that. And then it's like, well, then do it. Don't just sit at home. Like when guys watch football and they're like, I would have made that catch. I would have done. It's like, but you're on the couch. You're not the guy in the uniform on the field with another guy running at him.
Throwing that past, my shoulders hurting.
Yeah, just if I would have stretched today, I could have done this. And I think it was just this jolt. I'm the kind of person, I get an idea in my head and I just go do it. I'm like, I want to, like my girlfriend and I actually, she does drag, and we were supposed to go to I never say it right, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Edinburgh, in Scotland. And I just came home one day and was like, we're going to apply to the Fringe Fest in Scotland. and we put together an idea for a show and applied and got in and had started making plans to go. It was supposed to be in August of 2020. Obviously that got canceled, but I just get an idea in my head and then I just do it. I'm just that kind of person,
You
for
know,
better or for worse. Sometimes it's not the
that's the way more people should really live that way. It's so much more fun, and you get to experience so much more in life than just sitting there talking about it, and then your life passes you by, and one day you go, "Oh, you remember those things that I was going to do? And now I'm too old." So
yeah, and then you have an excuse of like, oh, I can't do this because I'm too old. I have kids. I have a mortgage. Whatever the reason is, it's like just And I think I'm 37 right now, and I feel like the closer I get to the big 40, I'm just like, what am I doing? What should I be doing? And what can I be doing? What do I want to do? Do I want to skydive? I should go skydive. I should, So I'm that kind of person. Are you that kind of person?
I am that kind of person, very much so. And the thing is that you're very fortunate because it sounds like you have a partner who supports you in that, and you need someone. If you're going to be with someone, you need to be with someone who has that same sense of adventure, that same soul. Because if you don't, they'll hold you back and they'll keep you from doing those things, and not intentionally, but they don't have that desire or drive to do it. And so, they'll, like you said, they'll always find excuse, and that excuse will, bleed over into you, because if they can't go, you're not supposed to go. So that sort of thing.
Yeah, sounds like you have some experience with that.
Yes. Many relationships. But
Yeah.
I've learned from each one of them, I will say.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, you need someone that supports you. You need someone that when you come home, you're in New Orleans and you come home and you're like, we're going to Scotland this summer. We're going to apply for this this international Fringe festival. And they're like, yeah, okay. How do we do it? Like that. If I didn't have that, I mean, we wouldn't be together. You have to uplift your partner and not just shut them down and be like, oh, that's stupid, or you're never going to get in, or it's going to be too expensive. It's like excuse, excuse, excuse. Like if you want to do it, try it. Maybe what if we didn't get in? What if COVID happened and it gets canceled and we don't get to go anyway? But at least we tried.
Right. I'll add one caveat there, though, is that when you decide to do something, this is for all you people out there, when you decide to do it, make a plan. Don't just go, oh, I'm going to do this, because it will not happen if you don't make a plan. Like I guarantee you didn't say, oh, I'm going to do open mic and not look for a place that has open mic. I guarantee you went and said, okay, where do they have open mic? What night is it on? What time is it at? And you got your butt down there, didn't you?
I did. I went to the mic before I signed up. I went to different mics in town to see which one I felt would be queer friendly, which one I felt would offer what the experience I'm looking for, who has an actual audience, because a lot of mics, it's hard to convince people to go to an open mic to watch comedians try different acts. So there was the mic I ended up going to was called Carrollton Station, and it was the oldest running mic in New Orleans, and they usually had about 30 comics sign up, but it was by the universities, by Tulane and Loyola, so they had a lot of audience members. So I was like, that's the one I want to go to. So I would go every week for a few months before I signed up, just to see how it worked. I also studied comedy. I wrote my stuff out. Some people, and you see this, I guess this year we won't, but New Year's resolutions. So many people's New Year's resolutions is to try comedy. And a lot of the comics make fun of it. But like I said earlier, I think everyone should try it. And I'm like, if it takes a New Year's resolution for you to do it, great. That's what got you to do it. But it also means that for January, the open mics are very overfilled.
Gyms are filled, open mics are filled. I'll keep that in. I know the gyms are filled, but I didn't know mics are filled. That's good.
Yeah, because the people that don't want to work out are like, I'll just talk. But a lot of people show up and they haven't written anything out. They just get up on stage and they're like, I'll just talk about what I feel like talking about. And it doesn't work that way. It's the same with karaoke. You got to at least have heard the song before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think I will do stand up, Mike. After talking to you, I mean, seriously, I never had because I have no qualms with talking in front of people, as long as I know what the hell I'm going to say. I won't just get up and go, and then stutter. I will say that I would find it odd like telling a joke to like one or two people, then I would be more comfortable if you had 2,000 people in the room than two people, because now the pressure's on. I got to make one of these two people laugh. If you got 2,000, somebody's gonna laugh, But when you only
Yeah,
got two,
also yeah, also the pressure's on them. I don't know if you've ever been in an audience where you are the one of two people listening to a
no,
comedian.
that's true. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
It's a two-way street, and it's not good on either end of that street.
Yeah, so it was smart of you to go and know which one of these places actually had an audience, so that you felt comfortable performing there. So I'll keep all the things that you said in mind when I go to do this. So who were some of your early influences? Like when you said I want to do comedy, who were some of the people who influenced you that you thought I want to be like that person?
Margaret Cho, 100%.
Mhm.
Margaret Cho's been doing stand up since she was 16. She knew it's what she wanted to do. She'd just get in a car and just drive around the country doing stand up. But she's always been true to herself. She's, also queer identified, has talked about that, has talked about, she's an Asian American comedian, which, when she started, there weren't, uh, I think she was the only female Asian American comedian out there doing her thing. Janine Garofalo is somebody I feel like is underrated as a stand-up, because people are so used to seeing her in movies where they're like, she's a funny actress. It's like, guess what? She's also funny on stage. Old school Rita Rudner, if anybody knows who she is. She's
Yeah.
a big Vegas act, but she does these one-liners that are just so perfect, and she has this little high-pitched voice, and she just delivers things in such a way that you don't see the punchline coming, which is really awesome. Kathy Griffin, I know people love to hate her, but
I don't.
she's
I'm sorry.
oh yeah,
There were so many gay guys who jumped on the hate bandwagon. It's like you people were just kissing her ass, talking about how great she was, and because of all this nonsense that went down, you turned. I hate these people who just go from one bandwagon to the next, depending on which one happens to be popular. And I go, when this all blows over and she's back on top again, you'll be sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, I was supporting her the whole time."
of
Not
course, of course,
no.
because but she's a smart businesswoman, and she's the hardest working comedian around. She's been doing this for 30 plus years. What she did a few years ago is she bought her own collection, because she got canceled, and then they had all of her specials, and she bought them all. So now when she releases them, she gets all the money. Like she knows what she's doing in the business way, and also in her comedy. I mean, her comedy's changed and shifted over the years to adjust to what audiences want. She started telling the stories about celebrities she'd met, and people love to hear that kind of stuff. And then she had a Bravo show, so she would do comedy about all the Bravo shows, which her audience, which is, I went to one of her shows in Biloxi, Mississippi, and she said, the first thing she says, "How many gay men are out there?" And it was like, everybody. And then they're like, "How many lesbians?" And it was like, "Woo." And then it was like, "How many straight women?" And they were like, "Yeah." And then, "How many straight guys that were dragged by their wives?" And it was a couple of like, yeah. So that, she knows her audience. She knows what she's doing. Maria Bamford is also someone I really, truly love, because she really does put all of her stuff out there. She has a lot of mental health issues. She talks about it. She shares what she's going through. And and she does it in a funny way where it's relatable, because a lot of times people don't take mental health issues as seriously as they should. And she's just very good at describing that and explaining that, and also doing it in a way that's funny.
Have you noticed, since you noticed Margaret, or you said Margaret Cho was the first person who influenced you? Have you noticed since that time that there are more and more gay comedians out there? Because I was noticing, like, it seemed like I was watching this comedic show, and it was like almost every person who was a comedian was gay. I was like, damn, there's a lot of gay comedians now, and it didn't used to be that way. In fact, I remember going to a comedy place here in Orlando, and there was this. And see, I'm all about gay jokes. I laugh with the best of them when I hear a good gay joke. But this particular comedian, you could tell it was back in the early 2000s when it
Mhm.
was still okay to, to be disrespectful to gay people. And I could tell that his joke, because he goes, "Are there any gay people?" But he said it like in a smart ass way. And so I was the only person, even though I wasn't the only gay person in there, I was the only person said, "All right, here." And he wouldn't look at me. And I said, "Right here," because I knew the joke he was going to tell was not going to be funny. It was going to be at our expense, basically. And he refused to acknowledge me, and he was a coward. But anyway, um,
Do you
it's
remember the joke?
no, I don't remember. I just remember it was exactly what I knew it was going to be. And I know
Mhm.
that the crowd felt uncomfortable because I was bold enough to stand up and go right here. And so they didn't laugh the way I think he would have gotten a laugh had I not said anything. And he felt uncomfortable, and you could tell it. Um, but going from the early 2000s to a comedian who's sitting there telling gay jokes that aren't, they aren't flattering to gay people, and not that they have to be, but they should be told in the right spirit. Um, Going from that to now, where we have so many comedians who've come out who are gay, it's been quite the transformation, and it's nice to see. So, have you noticed that yourself?
I've noticed that, yeah, not as much. In New Orleans, we have a decent amount of gay comics, but I have definitely noticed that when I look on Netflix and I see who's got a special, like Fortune Feimster, or Margaret Cho's always been out, Cameron Esposito, Rhea Butcher. Like there's so many you can just name. Mateo Lade. Like there's I think it's wonderful. First of all, I think we're funny people, and we finally were like, "Give us a microphone, bitch! Like we're gonna get on stage and do this." But I also, I think times, as much as we'd like things to shift even more progress in the progressive direction, I think they've shifted a lot in the last 20 years, especially with media representation of queer folks. It's not just a tragic. I feel like in the 90s you had either stereotypical gay people, which were generally just played by RuPaul, um, or Natasha Lyonne, or you had a tragic story of somebody who came, like a Matthew Shepard story, like those kinds of, where it was just, we didn't have the positive, happy representation that I feel like they're really, especially in the last few years. I don't know if you've seen The Prom on Netflix. It's my new favorite thing ever. But it's got Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman and James Corden, and it's about a lesbian in Indiana who wants to go to prom with her girlfriend. So they just they say there's no prom. And
I
then these Broadway actors come out there and they say, we have to give this little lesbian a prom. And it's funny and heartwarming, but that didn't exist 20 years ago. So you see that, and then you see comics that are on stage doing their thing, and it's the more you see that representation, the more you're going to get other people that are going to participate in that. But I think also, the more you see, like you see Margaret Cho out there in 1993 talking about being gay, so you think, I can talk about being gay. She's doing it. And I think that as time goes on, there's going to be more of that. I also think, there's always talk about comedy being a boys' club, that it's like this straight male white guy club. And I think in different directions, with, different minorities, with different representations, identities, that people are breaking that down. And they're saying, like, it doesn't have to be this way. Anybody can do comedy. You just have to be funny, you know?
right. I think when you have a couple things. One, I think that one of the things that may have opened up comedy for gay people too is the advent of Will and Grace back in the early 2000s, and where you had a show about gay guys that it was about gay guys. It was a show,
Yeah.
and of course it was comedy. And I think it, maybe that opened it up where people became more accepting as well. But when you have, the leaders of comedy, or at least who I consider to be the leaders right now, like Dave Chappelle or Joe Rogan, and they're sitting there going, yes, comedy should be for all. It should, that it doesn't matter if you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're trans, it doesn't matter if you're black or female or Asian or whatever you are. If you're funny, then you should be heard, and I think when you have the leaders who are sitting there saying, yes, this is the way it should be, I think it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%. And like you were talking about with that comic where you knew that joke was going to have this negative, I think people too are just talking about we say punch up. You're going to punch up. So
Right.
you can make fun of something, but you can do it in a way that it's not derogatory or offensive or using some sort of phrase that you shouldn't be using. And I feel like people are setting that example because there are, especially now, there's so many comedians, working comedians out there that there is this competition. So you do have to, in a sense, be the best. And the way to be the best is to really think about every single word you're using, who's going to be affected by this joke, like, still, and balancing that with free speech. Like, you don't want to not tell a joke because of, some
I
sort of reaction you're going to get.
Right. I want to, and we'll, I want to, I don't want to get to that yet, but I would do want to ask your opinion on that. So let me ask you this first. All right. So you mentioned several of your favorite female comedians. Who are some of your favorite male comedians?
Well, Dave Chappelle has always been in his last few specials, there were some trans comments that I didn't feel super comfortable with, but as a comedian, as a writer, um, and as a performer in general, he's amazing. He understands how a joke works. He can be funny just off the cuff. Like he's a true professional. And I really do love him. I think Michael Che is very funny. I think I'm Jewish as well, so of course Jerry Seinfeld. We gotta love Jerry Seinfeld. He knows how to write a joke too. He's a silly guy.
Yeah. Okay. So if I may add,
Yeah.
all right. So let's talk about Dave Chappelle first. See, while I didn't find Dave Chappelle's jokes offensive. Now, mind you, I'm not trans either, but I am gay, and I thought the jokes that he talked about, the G's and the B's and the L's and the T's, and talking, well, the G's don't like the L's and the L's don't like the G's, but the G's and the L's definitely don't like the B's. And I was laughing because it was, there's some truth to what he was saying, obviously, because when I first came out, my friends, my gay friends who I met, they were all talking down about lesbians. I go, what do you guys have against lesbians? And they're like, oh, they're so mean, or whatever it was. But they didn't like lesbians. Now, I personally never have had any issue with lesbians. I actually have, like I said, several friends who I adore and love and think are great people. And so when he was telling this joke, I thought it was funny because it was a generalization, as a lot of jokes are, but there was some truth in the jest. And so, and when he was talking about trans people, the way I took him talking about them is that he does really care for them and thinks the world of them, he's saying, but you got to admit this is kind of funny. And I say, in all of us, there's funniness in our lives, whether we're gay, lesbian, trans, black, whatever. I mean, it's just like Lisa Lampanelli sitting up there and telling a black joke and saying, where do you hide money from a black man? Under his work boots. I mean, that's a funny joke. Now, black people, there could be black men who took offense to it, but it's not something anyone believes. Like, no, I personally don't believe black men are any lazier than white men or anyone else for that matter. I know plenty of white men who haven't gotten off the couch in 2 years because they smoke pot all the time. So,
Oh yeah.
so it's like you said, to me, it was always like punching up rather than punching down. Now, I'm not trans, so I can't speak for trans people, but I don't think all trans people were offended by it either. In fact, I know they weren't, because there were plenty of that wrote in and said, we didn't take offense to it. Now, Jerry Seinfeld. I never watched Jerry Seinfeld's show, mainly because I wasn't home on Thursday night. Not because I was like, oh, I don't want to watch him, I don't think he's funny. But I did watch his Comedians in Cars Drinking Coffee. And I watched it because I loved the comedians that he would have on the show. And the only thing I found about him was that he seems to be very pretentious. Now, I don't know if it's an act. All I know is that the way he talks about fans And the way he talks down to other comedians, like, "Oh, I made it. I have $100 million and you don't," sort of thing. Now, I could be taking it completely wrong. It could be a joke, and it went over my head. So tell me, I was
Yeah, I guess you got to watch not just the show, but some of his stand up where what he does is he takes everyday things and makes these observations that like you might have thought of part of the observation, but he takes it 10 steps further. And
that
you're like, oh, I didn't think of it this way. And it's just the most like benign, thing. But yeah, that the getting, I never can say it right, getting coffee and cars with comedians. He's showing up in a different car every time. He's, but he probably does have some of that, but he's been rich for 30 years and
right.
yeah, he has more money than he knows what to do with. So that's got to affect you somehow. I always said, if I got rich, I would be so fat because I would just eat out all the time because that's what I would want to do is eat nice food.
Okay, so since I hadn't even thought about this question, but you just jarred something in my head. Talk about someone who's extremely wealthy and now seems to be mean queen, Ellen DeGeneres. What do you think about that? Now, I don't know her personally. I don't know if any of the stuff they say about her is true, but
it breaks my heart. I'll tell you, a lot of things break my heart, but that, she's from New Orleans. So she's like the, hometown person that made it from New Orleans doing comedy. She obviously, her coming out was the biggest coming out story in America. I mean, she, and she talked about it in her most recent special. Not only did she not work for 3 years, but Laura Dern, who had played her girlfriend on the show when they were having the coming out episode, she didn't get work for 3 years. Oprah played her therapist on the show. Oprah said she hasn't gotten more hate mail than she did for playing the therapist on Ellen's show. So it's like there's so much meaning to what Ellen has done for the community and how she's elevated herself. Her mom's huge in PFLAG. Her mom marches in, not recently because she's older, but she always marched in all the parades. Like they've done so much for the queer community that to hear that all of that stuff was, essentially just a public persona and that there's this other side to her. It's hard to hear, but I believe everybody that's saying this, and that's terrible, especially because her show is such a happy, she's always dancing on the show and everybody seems so happy to be there. So to hear this terrible stuff, it's terrible, but I believe everyone that's saying it. I don't think they would just say this for the sake of saying it.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's hard for us sometimes is that we have people who we respect for what they do, just because maybe Ellen is mean, but that doesn't mean she's any less of a comedian because of it. So sometimes you got to go, I like a certain person for what they do, but it doesn't mean I would like them as a person in real life. Like Don Henley, who's the lead singer for the Eagles. I think he has the most amazing voice ever in rock. I love his voice. And even to this day, he's got to be in his 70s and he still can belt out a song like No One's Business. But I don't think I'd ever want to meet him because he seems like a curmudgeon. And I just go, I would probably not like to hang around him. But I can still love his music, love his voice, and not necessarily, love him as a person. Now, he tends to be left on his viewpoints. So I like that about him. So, but again, we can always find fault with everybody and including ourselves. And so, people are going to like us for certain things and go, someone might hear my voice and go, oh, he's a good looking guy, but I can't stand his voice.
Can't do it. Or they might be like, oh, I love the voice,
but he's not my type.
Yeah, I mean,
who are you people?
Or some people might like the whole package.
Fortunately, there's at least one that I.
That's all you need.
And I like his whole package too.
Aww.
You see what I did there?
I do.
Okay. He will too. So, moving on. The pandemic hit. What what was it like? Because I know there were a lot of comedians talking about Dave Chappelle, Joe Rogan were two of the main ones, but what was it like to perform in front of audiences that were, you know, easily offended about everything? Did you find yourself when you're writing your material going, can't write this anymore, can't, nope, can't tell that one, like, did you catch yourself doing rewrites all the time?
I was doing that. So when I first started doing mics and performing, what I thought was the theory for myself, and I can't speak to other comics, was just tell the joke at the mic. That's where you test it. You find where the line is of like, this is okay, this is not okay, by telling it at a mic. Maybe someone will groan, maybe someone will say something to you afterwards about, why this wasn't funny or how they felt about it. But I was like, try it. And then when everything started happening, I started thinking like maybe that was bad because maybe I'm triggering the audience somehow. Maybe I'm doing something I shouldn't do. So I kind of try to define the line for myself, but then your comedy is not going to be as funny because comedy is, is one of the art forms where you need an audience to do it. Musicians can play at the bar, and whether people are interacting or not, they can still have that experience. We can't just be talking on a microphone to to ourselves. Essentially, it gets real
Right.
weird at a certain point. So it does make you think. And I think a lot of times it's good that it makes you think because it's not about what I think is funny all the time. And a lot of comics, especially new comics, they get up and they bomb and they tell the audience, you don't know what's funny. This is funny. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you think is funny. It's what they think is funny. They're the audience. They're the ones you're performing to. So I did that for a while where I just like readjusted. I would try to find the line for myself. And then I said, you can't be a comedian if you're not willing to take risks, if you're just running scared all the time, because part of being a comic and part of being a good comic is being true to yourself and putting, yourself out there. And if you're holding back, then the audience is going to feel you're holding back and you're just never going to be the top of the game.
Well, I don't know if it was Joe Rogan or Dave Chappelle, but one of them was talking about the fact that that when you go out, like there was a comedian who went out to one of the small clubs and he was trying new material, and so he and like you said, to see if this works or if it doesn't work. And apparently someone recorded him telling a joke that didn't work and then tried to act offended by it. And it's like, how do you know unless you try? And yet there's so many people out there who want to do oh, I got him, I got her, it's kind of moment, instead of just letting them, perfect their craft and let them work at it. Because like you said, you can't just perform for yourself. So there's going to be stuff that you're going to try and it may work and may not work, but you won't know until you put it out there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also once people get famous, like Dave Chappelle, he can't just pop up somewhere and people don't know who he is. So he can't just like go and do a set and have the set judged for what the set is. He's going to show up somewhere at a small club or whoever show up, and people are going to be like, "Oh, that's Dave Chappelle," and they're going to laugh more, they're going to engage more, they're going to not really give him the truth of like what his material is. And he's trying to test his material. He wants you to not laugh because it's Dave Chappelle and you got to see Dave Chappelle in a 20-person room. He
Right.
wants you to laugh because it's funny or not laugh. He wants you to not laugh if it's not funny so that he can know that joke doesn't work. So when he goes on SNL, he doesn't bomb. Like,
Right. Well, I think Dave Chappelle's one of the very few comedians who could pretty much say whatever the hell he wants to say and not worry about if people get offended because he's that popular. I mean, he can. I don't think he cares. Like he just doesn't give a shit. He's like, yeah, I'm going to say what I want to say because he, like you said, he's going to be true to himself, and I think that's why he's so good at what he does. And he's unlike the other comedians. His comedy is kept, it's evolved, like you were saying. And I
mhm.
think that's important because you see comedians like Chris Rock, who I loved Chris Rock back in the day, but his stuff hasn't translated to being nearly as funny because his comedy hasn't evolved. Kevin Hart, the same way. I just don't see his comedy evolving the way it should, like the way Dave Chappelle's does. Um, so do you think it's harder to perform in front of comedians than regular folks?
100%. Because this is, I'll use this example. Conan O'Brien was talking about like when he's with the writers for his show in a writer's room. He said, "I heard the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life," and I just looked at that person and said, "That's funny." Like that's how like
Right.
comedians relate to each other. Like we don't sit there cracking up at each other's jokes. We sit there and we're in our heads and we're thinking about the breakdown of the joke and we're like, yeah, that's funny. And that's the best you're gonna like. That's a compliment beyond compliments. But when you're performing, that's not helpful. You
Right.
want to hear the laughter and feel the vibe. So we really do rely on genuine audience members, which is why that's so important.
Do you feel we were about to talk on this, and I said, hold on just a second. Do you feel that there's ever a line that shouldn't be crossed when telling a joke, like for instance, like Daniel Tosh and the rape jokes that he did? Did you feel like that should there's just certain things that you shouldn't go there, or do you feel that comedians should have the right to say whatever, and if they can find humor in it, and whether you find humor in it or not, they should still have that right to tell those jokes?
I I have a complicated relationship with this kind of thing because I think, you shouldn't just say messed up things to say messed up things like you were talking about before.
Right.
I think your purpose behind it and what you're going for and punching up and these kinds of things are important. I don't think a white person should ever use the N word in any way, shape, or form. I don't care. I don't care what purpose it has to it. That's my personal opinion. Other people would say, we're in America, you have the right to free speech. You could say whatever you want. I don't agree with that. I don't think there's any context where that would be funny to me. But I also think say what you want and let the audience tell you to go F off or not. Like, I
Right.
mean, you can, I would say you're going to take a risk, and is that risk worth it to you? And you should weigh that. But they'll let you know. Twitter will cancel you. You will know.
I agree with you. I think they should have the right to say whatever they want to say, but freedom of speech doesn't mean there aren't consequences. It means that the government can, give you consequences for saying what you want to say, but people certainly can and should. If there's some, I remember, I'm going to date myself here. I remember back in 1986 when the Challenger um, blew up, and these DJ comedians, or thought they were comedians, told a joke almost within the week, was telling a joke about it, and it was like it wasn't funny. It was way too soon, and they found out that it wasn't funny. And so while you can say what you want to say, like you said, you shouldn't say it just for the sake of impact, to you know get for shock value. You should always punch up. And I don't think some comedians or wannabe comedians know that, and I think that's wise advice from you that comedians could learn, or wannabe comedians for sure.
Yeah, I think an unnecessary amount of time about this stuff because I love the art of comedy. I just love everything about it. So I read about it. I watch other people's specials. I write, if you watch someone's special, write out their jokes. You'll see how it works. Like I'm a comedy nerd, the way that people like Star Trek or Star Wars. Like this is my jam. So I think about all these things, and I'm always happy to talk about them. But there are some complicated things like. And just because I don't like Dave Chappelle's trans jokes doesn't mean that they're number one, that they're not funny. It doesn't mean that they're offensive. It just means that I personally don't like them.
And you make a very fair point, and I think that's the thing. It's like there's people out there who are comedians who that tell jokes I don't think are funny either, but I understand that there are people out there who do. So I don't have to like every joke. I don't have to be offended by it just because I don't like it. And and it doesn't mean that person shouldn't tell the joke just because I don't like it. Or even if I am offended by it, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to tell the joke. Maybe I get my feathers ruffled a little too easy, and there are people out there like that, especially in this day and age. It seems like everybody can get their feathers ruffled over the smallest thing, to where if we took everybody to took it to the nth degree, the way people are trying, you guys wouldn't be able to perform comedy. There wouldn't be anything you could talk about without offending somebody. And that's not good for anybody.
No, it takes away from the comedy. But that being said, if you tell a joke that I absolutely find offensive, I may never listen to you again. I might have been
Right.
the biggest fan. So you're taking that risk, and is that risk worth it? Was it worth Louis C.K. when he's trying to make his comeback to talk about the Parkland survivors of a school shooting to make fun of that? I don't think that's worth it. And I don't want, for various reasons, I don't want to hear anything that Louis C.K. has to say, but I just thought that was in the poorest taste at a time when he was trying to make this comeback. But he lost a lot of fans that potentially could have gotten back on his side after everything that happened. And he chose to do that. And he's definitely, like I said, for a million things, lost me as a fan. But that might have been the line for somebody else. Was that joke worth it? I absolutely think no way was it worth it.
Right. Well, we're gonna talk about Louis here in just a couple minutes. But I wanted to ask you first: are there certain challenges you face as a female comedian that the guys don't face, and are there, even beyond that, are there challenges that you face as a lesbian that straight women don't face as a comedian?
I mean, I think, I still think there is the boys club aspect of things. I think it is breaking down in a lot of ways, but I think it still exists. I think a lot of times, and I've been told this, that they asked me to do a show because they needed a female, and to have a female who's also gay check two boxes of diversity. So it'd be me and like five straight white men on a show. And they're like, oh, she checks both of these boxes. We now have a diverse show. And it's like, if you would have told me that before I agreed to do the show, I might not have signed up for this. So that still exists. I think there's some implicit bias with some people when a woman gets on a microphone, from women and men. I don't think that is just a male thing, where they, still have this idea that like women aren't funny, or there's like a more of an uphill battle for me to get you on my side. But, I take all that into account when I write my jokes. So when I get up on stage, within 10 seconds, I'm telling you a punchline, because I want you to be warmed up right away. I'll have a quick one-liner thing that'll grab you and get you in. And I think that helps disarm people, or say like, oh, she's, the person who could be funny or is funny. But I think that exists in the back of some people's minds, not everybody, and I can't prove it. I see the difference, when a guy with a deeper voice who's maybe taller gets up there versus even like a shorter guy with a high pitched voice. It's, there's all this perception that's out there. But you do the best you can. I think, some places I've been are, don't want to see a woman do comedy. They don't want to hear a lesbian say anything, but sometimes you can get them on your side by just being good and being professional.
Well, that was going to be my next question. In not just with the comedians themselves, but with the audience themselves, is there this, certain amount of misogyny that you have to deal with on a regular basis, or is it just in certain pockets, or is it all the time, or just a few times, or how is that?
It's in certain, I'd say it's in certain pockets. Overall, especially in the New Orleans scene, every city basically has their like local comedy scene, and ours is, compared to other ones that I've, traveled. I before COVID, I did a lot of like traveling to do comedy. And I feel like we're very uplifting and supporting of one another, and versus other cities where everything's a competition. Because if I get a show, that means you didn't get a show. Or, if there's somebody coming into town and you get to open for them, that means that someone else didn't get to open for them. So you took so there's that competition. But I think overall we're very supportive and uplifting of each other, for sure, in New Orleans. I mean, in other places, it's definitely different. I've experienced that, but you just do your best to be professional and not let anybody get in your head. Because at the end of the day, you're here because you want to do this. You want to make people laugh. You want to write jokes and say jokes that people relate to, and you can't let all the other bullshit get in the way of that. Whether you perform to 1 million people or 10 people, if this is what you love to do, then you just love to do it.
Have you seen personally yourself, and have you seen sexual harassment within the within the comedic community?
I think one thing about being very openly lesbian is I haven't personally, experienced that. I think everybody got the picture that like I'm not it for them.
Right.
And I have a lot of good friends in the comedy community where I've haven't had to worry about that personally. I know some people that things have happened to. I have not been a personal witness to things, but there's been some stuff that's gone down that I think in New Orleans, at least our community, if something happens, we take care of it. Like if somebody we had one guy that was accused of sexual harassment from 3 different women. We banned him from all shows and mics. He can't, he's not going to get up on stage with us because he's problematic, and I won't put my name on anything that's associated with his name. And I think if enough people take that stand, you can have that kind of security. But I don't know how it's like in other places. But you know, we I do my best to help everybody and protect everybody that I can, and I think our scene does a good job of that. But there's always going to be, wherever you go, there's always going to be problematic people. It's just how you handle it.
Well, you come from a very unique position, honestly. So you might be, somebody who could speak from this, without without bias. You mentioned Louis C.K., who admitted to doing what he was accused of doing, but then you have people like Chris D'Elia and Brian Callen, who were accused of sexual harassment. And do you think that, because it's almost like with the Me Too movement, it's almost as if these men are found guilty before they're found guilty. So my question would be, do we always believe the women no matter what? Do we always believe them? Or do we say, someone's innocent until proven guilty? Because when you make that kind of accusation, if it's ever found out to be false, you still don't. It's like when you call someone a pedophile and that person is not a pedophile, he will never ever recover from that, because people will still remember pedophile, that person's name, and whether it's true or not, that will haunt that person for the rest of their lives. And so do we give them the benefit of the doubt, or do we always believe women no matter what?
Well, I believe women no matter what. I think that this has been a huge shift from, years ago, when it's like, oh, for a woman to even come out and make an accusation, it ruins her life. It destroys her life. People are going to come out and they're going to victim blame. They're going to say she was wearing this. She slept with 3 guys before him, like that. Her life gets torn apart. So for anybody to make an accusation and put themselves out there like that, I 100% believe it, because their life, even if this did happen to them, their life is still destroyed. There are still people tearing them apart on the internet. There are still people threatening them, all sorts of harassment. So I don't think anyone will put themselves through that unless, this is something that happened to them, and most of the time, honestly, they have nothing to gain from it except for like making sure this doesn't happen to anybody else.
Well, all right. So I'll tell you, I come from a little bit of a different position, and not that yours is
I
wrong.
figured that.
And again, please, I want you to understand, I'm not saying, oh, you're wrong, I'm right, or vice versa. I'm just saying that these are different positions, because there have been many women who come out and accused men of things to find out that it was false. And to me, I feel bad when those things happen. Like when you said, "Oh, 3 women came and said this guy did it." To me, when you have more than one, and then I go, "Yeah, then there's something there. You need to do something about it. Maybe not judge him in the public yet, and say he's definitely this, but take steps like you said, where this guy's not allowed to be in the shows, because you have 2 women who sit there and like you said, they have nothing to gain from it. But there have been women who've made accusations towards men for whatever reason, whether they thought they could extort them of money or, or other things, and so I go, if I relate it to the death penalty. I go, I don't care how many guilty people get off the death penalty as long as not one innocent person is killed. And I believe that. And so I kind of go that way with this as well. It's like I don't want these guys to get off if they've committed some sort of crime, but I don't want one person accused of it that didn't do it and then ruin the rest of their lives. And it's just such a it's an unfortunate thing because there's dishonesty on both sides sometimes, and I do believe that the women are telling the truth for the most part, that the majority of them do tell the truth, and it makes it these women who do lie and do for whatever reason, I just look at them as the biggest criminals when it comes to that they're the reason why people won't believe women is because of their actions. And I go, you're doing more harm than women than the guys who are committing these heinous acts, because you give them credibility when it happens. You put doubt in people's mind because of what you did. So like I said, it's not that's just my position on it, and it's just a hard position because I feel for both sides. I feel for the woman who it happens to. I feel for the man who is accused falsely, and it's unfortunate that we have bad people on both sides that you can't always tell what's what.
Yeah, but I mean, like you look at Bill Cosby, what it took like 41 women before anybody believed them. Like that's insane to me that like so many of those women wouldn't have had to go through that experience. And then, if someone had believed someone 40 years ago, and people like Bill Cosby, like R. Kelly, they have money and they're men in positions of power and they have the ability to shut people up or to scare them or threaten them or destroy their lives. Like I said, blast them, in public media, share things about their lives, whether they're true or not, to really destroy them. It's like, what are you going to do? Bill Cosby almost got away with this he did for more years than I've been alive.
Yeah, that's insane that and I know that, especially because that's one of the arguments people will use. Well, if it happened, why didn't you come out 40 years ago? Because here's a very famous man who's very popular, who's very rich, and you're nobody, and you're going to come out and you're going to accuse him of doing something, and no one's going to believe you, like you said. And my heart breaks for these women because it's not something any woman should ever have to go through. And so, I completely understand, and it should never get to that point. And I do think women do need to come out when it happens. I mean, this is a different day and age, and I understand why they didn't come out back then. And I can even understand if it still happened today, but I'd encourage women to come out. You need to come out and tell your
We need
story.
to believe them. I
Yeah,
mean, that's if people know they will be believed from jump, like that's going to help versus they know what somebody else went through or a bad experience or the threats that they're already getting for even thinking about coming out. You need to believe people from jump. If they're not telling the truth with all the technology and all the time stamping of where we are when we are, like there's probably ways to have that exposed. But if people don't come out, these things continue to happen, especially with men in positions of power. Look at, Harvey Weinstein. Like this guy, for how long was
right.
he doing this shit? And he's exposing like actresses who are so excited that this is going to be their big break. And then this guy comes along and then he can destroy them. He's destroyed careers before they even got started. And that's so unfortunate just because someone caught his eye.
I think at the very least, whether because I know that a lot of people go, well, I know this guy and he's a good guy and he wouldn't do something like that. And I always go, you never know anyone 100%. But at the very least, if you don't believe the woman, don't disbelieve her. Like at least wait to hold judgment until you get all the facts. And I think that's the position I take, is that I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, he would never do that, because then that's dismissing her and not believing her. And it's not that I don't believe her. It's just that I want to see the facts. And as soon as the facts come out and go, she's absolutely right, then this guy needs to be, you know, taken care of, whatever it might be.
Put in jail, but that's not, if you're rich and successful, that's, it's happened. I mean, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly's got a trial that he's finally not going to be able to avoid. So these things do catch up with you. But in the meantime, how many other, women were exploited and had to suffer just because this guy had power and money and influence.
Well, we see, I guess one of the problems I also have is with the Me Too movement is that you had Alyssa Milano who would sit there when Kavanaugh was being accused. And of course, the right was sitting there going, oh, this is all nonsense and trying to discredit the woman. But when it happened to Joe Biden, they're all sitting there discrediting the woman. It's like, you can't do that. You cannot do that. If you're going to say believe all women, then you believe all women. You don't sit there and go, oh, we'll believe all the women on the left, but not on the right. It's not, that's not how it works. And so they have an issue to themselves in believing all women sometimes. And again, I say, don't discredit them and don't call them names. Don't, sit there and attack them because they said they accused somebody that you happen to like. Find out if what they're saying is true. And then let's take the necessary steps from that point. So this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's just because honestly, like if you think about if this had happened, something that happened to you, if Harvey Weinstein had done something to you, like the easiest thing for you to do is nothing. Is just
Right.
suffer in silence because you're not going to put yourself in a public platform. You're not going to put yourself out there for people to threaten you, for his lawyers to come after you, to, even just bankrupt you with different defamation lawsuits. Like it's not even to come after your character or anything like that, but they'll destroy your career. They'll destroy how the public sees you. They'll take all your money and assets. Like they won't stop. So the easier thing would be to say nothing. So for you to even think about taking all of that on to protect other women and to make sure that this person or other people, well, let's just say women, to make sure that this person pays for what they did, or at the very least that they won't do it to somebody else. Like that's a lot. That's a huge ask to ask anybody to do and to put themselves through.
Right. Well, you make great points, and I don't want to make light of this, but this is supposed to be a comedy part. It's like I want to laugh because I have some really serious topics that we talk about all the time. So
yeah.
I'm going to say this. This is one of the women who made a false accusation that everybody sat there and just laughed. Nobody believed this woman because she accused Richard Simmons of sexual harassment, and I was like, Richard Simmons, really? Yeah. Sexual harassment? Sorry. You could have picked anybody else except Richard Simmons. Richard Simmons is the last person who's ever going to sexually harass a woman. I would believe if there was some, grip boy or best boy or whatever they're called, who works behind the scene, that I would sit there and go, yeah, that's possible. But
yeah, I hope Richard Simmons, I hope nothing with him because we, like you said, we've probably lost Ellen. So it's like we can't lose.
Right.
We can't lose Richard too. Another New Orleanian. So.
And that's the thing. It's like it was that particular woman who was looking to extort him for money, and I don't know how she didn't know that this man is not straight. And how is her?
Okay, so she admitted that this was.
I don't know. I don't know if she ever admitted it or not.
Okay.
But I mean, it never made the light of day in the courtroom because everybody was like, "This is the most ridiculous thing ever." I should look that up. I should Google that.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know this story, or else I would probably have a lot of opinions on it. But yeah, I was like, if she admitted to making it up, then yeah, it does. Any sort of falsity with this, it does a disservice, like you said, to everybody. Right. So I still take this I would still rather believe all women, even if some are not telling the truth, versus not believing anybody, because you can't put that burden on the person who's already been a victim and now they're being re-victimized by the media and by the lawyers and by whoever else. I can't put this additional burden that they have to meet. It's just, it's too much. And I applaud everybody that's been able to handle this, this journey to protect the rest of us.
Well, I think also too, we need to, we need to clarify our terms sometimes too, because there have been women who say they were sexually harassed because somebody, like we were talking about catcalling. There's been guys who, who weren't catcalling, but they were going, they might give them a compliment and the girl did, or the woman didn't like the compliment. But I asked, and my question would be, look, you didn't like the compliment from him. But if that was George Clooney that gave you the compliment, would you appreciate it then? Or Brad Pitt gave it to you? Because if you say yes, then he didn't do anything wrong. He's just not your type. And you didn't like the fact that someone who you think was beneath you, should never have approached you, actually had, the courage to sit there and pay you a compliment. And so I think we need to be very careful that we don't call everything sexual harassment. Just like nowadays it's in vogue to call everything violence. And I go, that's not violence. And every time you call something that isn't violent, then when there is violence, you minimize the importance of that word, and you minimize what people who really went through violence had to go through. You minimize what happened to them, to the event that took place, that they, and I just think we've got to be careful that we don't, that we don't exaggerate things, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, just in general life, in everything in life, it's like, just be honest and
Yes.
don't exaggerate or under exaggerate. Like, I think that's just a general life tip that everybody should take on.
I think as comedians, comedians understand the importance of words probably more than just about anyone, maybe other than lawyers. But other than that, I think you guys understand the importance of words, and that's why you choose very carefully. You're able to, orchestrate these jokes, if you will, to where they're funny, because you put all these words, like you have all these words and you put them together in a genius way to make people laugh. And that takes special talent.
Yeah, no, when you go to mics, it's like you'll do a whole joke and then you'll go to another mic and change one word and just see how that one word changes the joke. But I mean, there's certain words that'll always be funny. People like the word moist is always a funny, creepy word, however you look at it. You'll always say that word and get some sort of reaction out of whoever it is, like that. All of that stuff really does matter, because you could, choose I can't think of another word for moist, because moist is just that word, but like that rings something in everybody, whether you're like, oh, moist, or you're like, that's a funny word.
And now I'm going to tell you, I don't care how old I get, you can tell a fart joke, or someone could say the word fart, or it just fart, and I will laugh. I just can't help myself. I go, my friend goes, there's nothing funny. I go, there's everything funny about farts. Farts are just funny. Do you know?
Yeah, and it has a sharp, anything with like a sharp sound at the fart.
Yeah.
Like that's the sharp T, like it rings something in our ears, and all of that stuff really does matter. And if you're perfecting your craft, then you should really look at what each word does for your joke. Or if you have too many words, like a lot of people like to ramble, it's like stand-up's really, the art is just like set up punchline, and you disguise it in a story, or you disguise it in a paragraph or a situation. But like that's what you really want to break it down to. So if you have too much space between the setup and the punchline, people forget what the setup is, right, and they're not going to understand the punchline.
Right. Do comedians, are they like cops? Do they just hang out with other comedians?
A lot of them do. I very consciously try to, maintain my friendships outside of comedy, because you don't want to get, sometimes you hang out with comics, like we'll do a show and we'll just all sit around in a backyard, just drinking and talking until 3 a.m., just shooting the shit, just like riffing off each other. I love that vibe when you just joke back and forth and everybody understands how jokes work. But sometimes you need to talk to other people,
What do you talk about? So are you just telling jokes, or do you actually do you have conversations about certain topics, or the topic could be anything, whatever happens to be in the news that day?
Yeah, we talk about whatever. I mean, I love football. I talk about football with people. Whatever comes up, with probably a lot of shit talking about whatever happened at the show or the mic that day. But yeah, I have a lot of friends that are comics, and I have a lot of friends that aren't comics, and both relationships I definitely value. But I think when you have a bunch of comics hanging out, and the way you can tell is when you have a bunch of comics hanging out, and then like you have a friend or somebody who's not a comic that hangs out, they can feel the vibe and the difference. So, but it's good. Like a lot of famous comics have writers that help them out, you know? Like it's not just them writing jokes. Like they all, like Amy Schumer and Nikki Glazer and that whole crew, you know, they all sit around writing jokes together and they help elevate each other and they give each other punchline, you know, so it's like you can have that camaraderie. And it just helps because sometimes your joke is like almost there and you're just missing this little piece and someone will just come up to you and be like, what about this? And you're like, that finished the whole joke. Like it's a beautiful, wonderful thing when everybody's on the same page and we all just want to create the funny.
Right. Well, I had a theory. I had a personal theory about why I felt like comedians always hung out together. And I was talking to a friend. I go, look, you're a comedian, right? Just imagine you're a comedian and you go to a party, and someone goes, "Hey, what do you do?" And you go, "Oh, I'm a comedian." And they go, "Tell me a joke." Like, do you find that like people want you, like, expect you to be funny all the time, and that you're supposed to have a joke at the drop of a hat?
Yeah, but I will tell them a joke because it makes them uncomfortable. Like we talked about earlier, if it's just a performance to one or two people, it's the awkwardness that they're feeling and the pressure that they're feeling to laugh. So at first, when people be like, "Tell me a joke," I'd be like, "Nah, but you know, I'm not really on stage right now, and I'm on a microphone. Like maybe later." And then now I'm like, "All right, I'll tell you a joke," and I'll just tell them a joke to their face, and it makes them really uncomfortable. And hopefully, they never ask anybody else to do that again.
I was like, there's probably very few jobs where you have, where someone goes, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" where they expect you to perform it right then and there. But comedian
Yeah.
certainly be one where people just feel like, "Oh, well, tell me a joke," like, "Oh, entertain me." Like, well, let's see if you're funny, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because for an actor, you're not like, oh, just do a scene for me real quick. It's
Right.
it's that I think people get uncomfortable. They don't know what to say. People ask questions, and when you give them the answer, they don't have a follow up, so they just say the most awkward thing. And I think that's when you tell someone, oh, I'm a comedian. What are they going to say? Are you funny? Like they don't know how to react, so they just say weird things.
Right. I'd be like, "No, I'm not funny."
Yeah, I'm terrible. I just talk about depressing shit on stage. I just read Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, it's like, what do you want? But I think that's part of it. And so if they're like, tell me a joke, I'm like, all right, you asked for this.
Right. Exactly. Get ready. Have you ever bombed on stage, or have you ever like gone blank? Like, what is your worst story that happened to you on stage?
Well, the worst heckle I ever had, I was in Lafayette, Louisiana, which is about 2.5 hours outside of New Orleans, and I was at this bar, JP's, that no longer exists. And I got up and I told a joke about being Jewish, and someone from the audience yelled, "They're still Jews."
Oh, damn.
And I completely froze because I wasn't ready for it. I was only like a year into comedy, so I wasn't really as equipped to deal with hecklers or to think on the spot. And I just didn't know what to say. And everyone got quiet, like they were waiting for an answer. So I didn't know if like everybody just was like, are there still Jews? Or like waiting for me to kick their ass or like do something. So I completely froze and I can't even remember what I did the rest of the set, but I totally was thrown off by that. And then, I'm like, there's a million things I could have said, but like in that moment, you're on stage. There's like 50 people staring at you. You're in a town. I think it was my first or second time in that town. I didn't know, what to expect. I wasn't in my comfort zone. So I just kind of got quiet for a while and tried to move on. But because I didn't address it, because I just let it sit there, it really, I've thought about that a lot, and
Yeah.
since then I've been able to deal with hecklers. I don't really have too many. Most people are there to see you and there to encourage you, but that was the worst heckle and the worst moment I've had on stage.
So you have lines for hecklers now. Like if they were to heckle you, you'd have something a comeback for them.
Yeah, I don't have anything pre-prepared because I used to try to pre-prepare things, but it really depends on who's talking back at you. The best thing to do is number one, don't ignore them, because when you ignore somebody, especially most hecklers are generally have had a few drinks,
Mhm.
or in New Orleans, probably something else. And so they don't want to be silenced. So if you just ignore them, they will get louder or get closer to the stage. So sometimes it's just acknowledging them and saying, "Hey, what's your name? Where are you from?" Just distracting them from whatever they were yelling in the first place, or just asking them to repeat it and then making a comment about it. But you can't really prepare for that because you don't know who's going to be heckling you and what they're going to be saying and what condition they're going to be in. So it's just knowing that could happen and being ready to address it. But I think ignoring it and like letting them either continue to yell or letting the silence sit there where the other audience members are like, are you gonna do something about that? I think that is worse for everybody. But if you can address them and then get right back on track to your comedy, people appreciate you dealing with it professionally and respectfully. And the audience will turn if someone's too drunk and they're not making sense and they're yelling. The audience will be like, "Get out! We came to see a show. We didn't come to hear you." And so they'll help you out sometimes.
Yeah, there's a comedian. I've seen him on YouTube quite a bit, and I can't remember. I don't know why I can't remember his name right now, but he's known. Like people go to his comedy because to heckle him because he just rips into them and he makes it like that's part of the show. I think is that just how he just obliterates these hecklers, and I think people go there just to get obliterated by him because he's so good at it. So.
And if people can laugh at themselves, that's great. Yeah. I mean, in that situation, they know what they're signing up for. They know what they're asking him to do, and he'll deliver it. And same with like Lisa Lampanelli, like you talked about. People go to her show, they know what to expect.
Right. Exactly. Now, for you, would you rather follow a good comedian or a bad comedian? Because I know that I've heard that there are comedians out there who will always take a bad comedian with them to set up so they'll look like the hero. But I also heard comedians go, look, if you put a good comedian out there, that good comedian is just going to make you better. So what are your thoughts on that?
Generally, I get less nervous if I follow somebody that, maybe didn't do so great. It depends. If they're bad as in they're offensive and they've said things to really like grind people's gears, then I don't want to follow that because then I have to get the audience. Well, hopefully the host will step in and help, but otherwise you have to get the audience like back on, the side of the comedians, and that takes work and it takes time out of your set. But if it's someone that like tried really hard, just didn't, they're newer, they're still working their stuff out, they're not quite there. I like to follow someone like that because then, if you've been doing it longer, you can kind of deliver a little more. But it's also great to follow a good comedian because if somebody killed it, you're going to ride that wave of that energy that the audience has. And so they're already in a good mood. They're already cracking up. They're ready to continue cracking up. But sometimes if somebody kills like so hard, it is hard to follow that act, to follow that energy. It depends too on the comics because some comics come out there and, I'm someone I stand there with the mic and I talk the same way I'm talking to you. Some people come out there and they got these crazy antics and they do voices and impersonations and it's hard to follow that energy if you're somebody that doesn't bring that energy to stage. So it really depends on a million things. But if the person before me left the audience in a good place and didn't offend anybody, then I'm happy to follow them. Otherwise, I got some work to do.
I was just thinking about like you have someone like Gilbert Gottfried come out, and then after Gilbert Gottfried, you have someone like Stephen Wright come out. It's like polar opposites.
Or Robin Williams. It's like how can you?
Oh yeah, holy crap.
How can you follow that energy? Nobody can follow that energy. You can't get on stage after he's going a mile a minute and killing it and doing a person. He has the whole package. He's doing all of the things, and then you're going to get up there and stand there with a mic and talk like this. Like yes, it's a tricky thing to match the energy, but hopefully the producer, the host of the show thought about that beforehand and they should balance those kinds of things out.
Right. Do you find it hard to come up with new material, or is that something that is easy for you?
Most of the time, I mean, we all have our notebooks and our, notes on our phones. So there's always like the same way, like you said, I write down ideas all over the place on all kinds of things. I put them on Twitter when I think of them and I just want to like have somewhere to keep it. So the ideas are always there. I don't have a problem coming up with ideas. Sometimes just sitting down and really working out the material takes a lot, because sometimes when you have time, you're like, oh, I have a few hours, I'm going to sit down and write, but the inspiration just isn't there. And then another time the inspiration's there, but your parents are coming to visit, and you can't be like, hey, go in there, I'm going to write now. So it's kind of just that balance. But I think most comics have a million ideas going a million places a minute, and as long as you write them down, because if you don't write them down,
Right.
you'll definitely, they're gone.
Yeah, I'm so glad because I have this joke about God, and I think it's a funny joke, but I'm glad I wrote it down because a friend of mine's like, "Well, tell it to me," and I go, "I don't remember it. I have to go look at it."
Yeah.
I wrote it down. Thank goodness. Um, have you ever caught anybody stealing your material, like where a joke that you told, and then you hear another comedian telling your joke that you came up with?
I only had that happen once, but it was we both told the same joke on the same night. This guy showed up later in the evening, and he told the same joke. But I think after talking to him, I think we both just came up with it. It was kind of in different contexts. It was basically that essentially that the Holy Ghost is like the first three-way that people had, because when you dance in high school dances, if they're like in a religious school, they say, oh, you have to leave room for the Holy Ghost. So the joke is that that's the first three-way that like a lot of people had. And I think we both came up with that separately, like talking to him. He's like, they said that to me in high school. And I was like, yeah, my high school had a lot of Mormon people, and the Mormon people would always have the Holy Ghost between them. And I'd be like, why are they dancing like that? And, they explained it. So I think that came up, but we had a conversation about it. He didn't hear me do the joke. He showed up late to the mic, did the joke. Someone else came up to him and was like, Amanda just told that joke 20 minutes ago. And he came up to me and was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And we had a conversation about it. But otherwise, most of my jokes, I really try, they generally are about things that happen to me or are personal to me or someone I know. So it'd be really hard to steal it.
Have you ever thought of a joke that you go, this is really funny, but like this would be funny if Dave Chappelle told this joke. Like I'm going to give this joke to Dave Chappelle, or I'm just using his name, but you knew a comedian and you go, oh, this is a funny joke, but it's not my kind of joke, but this would work with so and so, and call them up and go, hey, I've got a joke for you.
Yeah, I used to have my buddy Horatio Dell, who stopped doing comedy because he's got a kid now and he wanted to be present for his child or whatever. But me and him used to have writing sessions together, and sometimes he'd write a joke that he's like, oh, you could tell this, but like I can't tell this. And some jokes that I would write would fit a straight man with a child, or with a in the would fit a straight man better than they would fit a lesbian. So, we kind of played around with those ideas. And I love collaboration. I think, a lot of comics, this is my joke and I can't share it. And it's like, if we all shared it, we would all elevate each other, I think, but other people don't agree with that. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I think you should, like, if I have a joke, and in fact, I was going to tell you, but here's the thing. I'm not a professional comedian. So I was like, listen, I wrote this thing down for hecklers that will work on every heckler, but then I'm bigger too. So I'm not worried about anybody getting up. So I don't really care. But I had this whole thing about it, like, but who am I to tell you what I have about heckler? You're a professional comedian. I'm not. I just play one in my head. That's, so, but yeah, but if I was a comedian, I would sit there and go, share, don't steal, share. Don't be Carlos Mencia, but feel free to share, and
yeah. And I had, there was one joke, I can't remember what I say. I can't remember the joke, but I was at an open mic. Hannibal Buress was there, and he was sitting at the bar, and he heard me tell this joke. And after I got off stage, I went to the bar to get a drink, and he came up to me and he was like, at the end of this joke, you should have said this. And I was like, I'm going to use that. And I did use it. And he said, yeah, go ahead, use it. I'm not going to use it. It's part of your joke. But it was like just a little tag, like a one sentence thing at the end of the joke. And he nailed it. Like it was what that joke was missing, which is why I was at the mic in the first place. And I would have liked to figure it out. But I was, happy to get that help. But other people would have been like, I'm not using that because somebody else gave it to me. And it's like, he
Yeah.
told me I could use it. He said, go ahead and use it. And he offered it to me.
Do you wear a flannel shirt when you're on stage?
Sometimes.
Okay, so when you were in a flannel shirt, if the heckler starts in, go, "Aw, and what's your name? What's your name, young man?" And just go, "How old are you?" And just, you make him feel like a kid and go, "Did you sneak out after curfew?" Because only a child would think it would be okay to interrupt somebody when they're doing a show. Would I go to your work and say, "Hey, you didn't dig that ditch deep enough"? No, I wouldn't. So, I mean, to me, I just think that you would have the audience completely on your side. But again, that's just my thought.
Yeah.
I've never tried that joke, so I don't know. It could dawn. And
I think depending on the person, especially if you have a drunk person, like sitting them down and being
right,
like, hey,
right.
hey, what's your name? I'm going to talk in this voice.
See,
Like,
you
I think that makes, yeah.
have that voice, and you could pull that off. I think hilarious, and I think the audience would laugh their ass off at you. But if they don't, you know, you could blame me. You could
I won't say I got it from you.
So listen, folks, I wasn't going to tell that joke, but that came from this guy who does a podcast. It's his fault.
Here's where you can find him.
Exactly.
Here's his picture.
We have Jonathan Van Ness's people pissed off at me,
What happened?
I wanted to have him as a guest on the show. So I messaged him. I said, "Look, I'm a big fan of Queer Eye." I go, but I said, I no disrespect. I go, but I'm not a huge fan of yours, and I would like to talk to you as to why. And I really wasn't like, if you saw what I wrote, you would see I was being as respectful as I could, but I was being honest. I didn't want him to come on the show thinking I was a big fan and like kiss his butt and get him on the show just so he
Mhm.
on my show. I said, look, I completely understand. This is me, not you. This isn't about what you do. It's about me, and I want to get to the heart of it. And I said, I would love to have you on. I'd love to have a psychologist on and talk about this because I'm not the only one who feels this way. I go, there are plenty of people in the gay community. Well, he got pissed because I said I wasn't a big fan of his and said, "Oh, I know what your problem is, honey. You got what do you say? You have homophobia or something." I was like, "Really?" And I go, "Look." And so I was extremely nice. I was not disrespectful. I didn't go, "Look, you're not a psychologist. You're a hairdresser, but I'm sure you fancy yourself on." I didn't say any of that.
Yeah, you're
I
like, this
just
is why I didn't like you.
yeah, exactly. But what I found was what not only was he incorrect, but and I actually did the show, and everyone who heard the show praised me because they didn't think I could, that I would go high, that I would go low, and I didn't because I don't think he should be disrespected. And if you listen to the show, I think I did him justice, but what he did was really not cool. He for someone who's against bullying, he took a portion of what I said and what he said, and he took it out of context and he posted on his Instagram story. And so his fans went to my podcast and started giving me 1 star, call me homophobic. They don't even know me. I have my one of my very first episodes was these two gay activists who were instrumental in, especially here in Central Florida, with the gay movement back in the 70s. I mean, these were the first founders of this area of getting gay center up and everything else. And so for them, it was kind of funny that these people were calling me names, saying I was mean spirited and all this other stuff, and they did not listen to 1 second of one of my podcasts, or they would have realized that what they were saying was completely untrue. So here's a man who's supposed to be anti-bullying, pulling this little stunt, knowing that his fans are going to come over and try to bully me, which was kind of silly. But and so I was like, that was not cool. But I didn't get offended by it, and I certainly wasn't offended by his fans, because his fans are only going to do what fans do. They think the world of him. They probably worship him and think that he can do no wrong, and so they came back and wanted to protect him. And so I get that. So that was
Yeah,
that.
but he still did the show, so
No, he didn't do the show.
oh.
I did the show without him.
Ah,
And so I said,
got it. Okay.
and
I was
so
like, he still went on, so it obviously,
yeah,
hit him somehow.
no, he did, but he did pat himself on the back, because as he was trying to be, he was trying to act like that bitchy sweet, where you go, oh, well, good luck with your show. I've done 134 shows. In fact, I just talked to Elizabeth Warren last week. And he's like, it's like backhanded type compliment,
Yeah.
like good luck with your show type thing. And I was like, okay, I see where we're going. There's not going to be any winning with you. So I just said, thank you very much for your input. I appreciate it. I'm sorry that you took it the wrong way. I really was just trying to be honest, and left it at that until he posted the story. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to do a show about this. So
Yeah, well, now you have to address it because it's been addressed in the. This is what I'm talking about. Once it goes public, like
right.
it's a whole thing you have to deal with.
Yeah, because if you don't, then it does make me look like I'm all the things that he said I was, or that they say I was. And I'm like, yeah, that's not who I am, and it's never been who I am, I was, or am. And so you're right. You have to address it when something like that happens. Otherwise, you know,
You're
it's
going to be taken. Yeah, you're going to be taken out of context because there's no one's going to have all the information. That's part of all this stuff is like get all the information out there. If you're taken out of context, you can say, here's the whole message. Here's his whole response, or their whole response. That way everyone has all the information and can make the decisions for themselves. So
that's what I did. I took screenshots of the entire conversation before he blocked me, because I knew that was coming. So I took
yeah.
the entire conversation with screenshot. I put it up there and I go, this is what it was said, and this is how it was said. And so at the very least, he was being disingenuous, with what he did, and he knows it. So he's not, again, I don't want to badmouth the guy, but he's not a saint. But none of us are, so
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I would appreciate the honesty of, anyone that asked me to do a show or a podcast or perform anywhere, whatever. Like, if this is the thing you're going to talk about, or if this is the position you're going to take, it is nice to get a heads up about it.
Right. And that's what, I'm going to start something. It's going to be called Tribe Truth or something, or Team Truth, because this is what my podcast is really about. It's about thinking outside the box. And I told you, as my listeners and viewers will know, as I told you, I don't edit my show, simply because I don't want anything ever taken out of context. I will never go back, like when you and I were talking about should we believe all women, and find some slither of a sentence where you said something about men, women, and then you go, oh, Amanda's against men,
Yeah, you can cut that a million. You can cut just me saying no and
right.
Just cut that in there, and then and I'm trying to prove, this is absolutely not what I said, but everyone's like, I heard it.
Yeah, there's too much of that nonsense that goes on
Mm-hmm.
these days, and I just go, I want to be as honest, and if I don't have the truth, if I think I do but I don't, and someone could show me, I will turn around and go, I was absolutely wrong. Here are the real facts, and I have no issue with doing that, because that's the only way we're going to progress, is by being honest with ourselves, and that's the only way we're going to be happy. So if we're, like I said earlier, if we're lying to ourselves, we're not happy. You can't be happy and lie to yourself.
No, absolutely not. We've got a lot of life tips today for folks.
I know.
Go do karaoke. Go be honest with yourself.
I think seriously, those, being honest with yourself and going and doing karaoke or stand-up comedy or jumping out of a plane or whatever, I think that the advice that you gave with that is just absolutely pearls of wisdom, and I hope people will follow it, because it's obvious that you live a happy life because of taking life by the balls, if you will, and running with it, so that, or by the horns, let's say that.
By the ovaries.
Exactly. So So what's up for you next? When's your Netflix special coming?
Working on it. In 2019, I recorded a half-hour special in New Orleans at the House of Blues, and it's called "Sturdy Lesbian Lumber," and it's on YouTube for now. I was working to get something together to film another one, but obviously COVID has delayed that. But hopefully, I'll be able to. That's self funded and just to put out there for folks. But hopefully, I can get another half-hour special together.
It's called Sturdy Lesbian
Lumber.
Lumber. Okay,
Yeah.
Sturdy Lesbian Lumber on YouTube.
Yeah, you can look up Sturdy Lesbian Lumber. It'll be the number one, the number one option there.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been working on some. COVID actually has helped me as a comic because I feel like all of my other material before COVID seems old. So I've now been working on getting some new material together. And once things, hopefully with the vaccine or whatever's happening, things will start to reopen and I can start getting back out there. But I'd like to film something else. In the meantime, I host and produce the Near and Queer to My Heart podcast. We release an episode every other week, and that's on everywhere you can get podcasts. And making some online videos and just writing new material and hoping for the best for the world.
There you go. And folks, for so that you can find her podcast and find her YouTube, I'll make sure there are links below so that you can find Amanda there and listen to her podcast as well. So
thank you.
My pleasure. Amanda, thank you for being with me. I've had a great time. And like I said, you're my second comedian. The first comedian was Frank King, who wrote for Jay Leno for 20 years. But we were talking about suicide prevention because he's dealt with suicide his whole life. And so while he was a comedian, we weren't really talking about comedy. So this is the first time we really had a chance to talk about comedy and what it's like to be a comedian and that whole lifestyle and everything. So thank you so much. I really appreciate having you on. And when you become famous, do not forget who I am. It's like,
oh, I won't. This interview will be on my website.
Because I'm going to call your show when you're up there, like on Ellen, and I'm going to like Ellen's show, and I'm going to go, excuse me, can I talk to Amanda? Tell her it's Kurt Powers, and she'll like, who?
Feel like, come on up.
Don't make me do a show about like I did for Jonathan Van Ness.
I would never.
Well, thank you again. I wish you had a great Christmas. So I wish you a very happy New Year. And if you ever want to come back on the show, you have a show coming up or anything, please let me know. And we'll be glad to have you back on. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And it was nice to nerd out about comedy. I've missed doing that. So thank you so much for reminding me why I do what I do.
It's my pleasure. And I do. I wish you the best. I cannot wait to see your Netflix special. So keep that in mind.
Yeah,
I'm going to have my Netflix special. So
let Netflix know I'm coming.
Well, folks, that's going to be our show for today. Thank you for watching us and listening to us and joining us, because I appreciate your viewership and your listenership. You mean the world to us. And this is why I do what I do. And this is why Amanda does what she does, too. So thanks for everything. Until next time, take care of yourself. Be safe and wear your mask.
Yes. Please do.
Okay.